So, the nearly new Mercedes CLA. We know the previous model was the sportier saloon version of the A-Class. But Mercedes now make a dedicated Mercedes A-Class saloon. So where does the CLA now fit? Today I'm going to delve into this car's personality and see whether it's a perfect combo of function and form, or if it's Mercedes' latest faux pas. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. In the engine bay, you'll find a Renault engine. I wouldn't worry though, as people have said good things about this power unit. With 136 horsepower and 200 Newton meters of torque, we'll have to see if it provides the effortless Mercedes driving experience later. But first, let's check out the 30 to 70 screen. As you can see, we managed a time of 8.58 seconds. Certainly not bad for the power this engine makes, and it does actually put it ahead of the higher powered Audi Q3. And I'd say for daily driving, that is plenty quick enough. The inside is unsurprisingly a lot like the new Mercedes A-Class. Sporty two-tone seats and the ultra-sharp screens fits with Mercedes' usual dress-to-impress design language. Everything in here is well laid out, and the fact you can control both screens from the steering wheel makes this my favourite infotainment system yet. The touch controls can be fiddly at first, but they're great once you get accustomed to them. Now, this isn't a fully optioned out car, but it's got the must-haves like heated seats, the widescreen sat-nav, and a reverse camera. There's then the centre console, which houses another way of controlling your infotainment screen. The touchpad is actually better than I expected, and it has haptic feedback so you can feel what you're doing. In any case though, I still think the touch controls on the steering wheel are better. Looking out the back, this is where you'll notice the main difference between this CLA and a regular A-Class. Legroom is fine, but headroom is down by 2 inches, making this a squeeze for anyone over 6 feet. Still, at least the windows go all the way down. There's also some nettage for your car's manual, and big enough door bins for some 2-litre bottles. The boot is surprisingly nearly the same size as a regular A-Class. At 460 litres, it can carry 2 large suitcases and 1 small one. You can then fold the seats down, so carrying the Christmas tree is no problem at all. Okay, let's get on the road and see how she handles some B-roads. The 2019 Mercedes CLA. How does it handle then? Well, we're going to start off around town as usual, then move on to the motorway, and then do some twisty road driving. Should give us a good mix of what this car is all about. Going over these speed bumps here, it feels like any Mercedes should really. Soft but controlled. And this car also has "Hey Mercedes." It's very annoying. Steering at low speeds is pretty good as well. Again, it's very Mercedes-like. It's very light, but also quite direct. It seems to lighten up the more you turn the wheel, which is a bit of a weird sensation at first. But once you're used to it, it makes it feel really luxurious. You've then got hill hold assist, so once you come to a stop, you can just take your foot off the brake and it'll hold the car in place. One thing I have noticed with Mercedes suspension is that sometimes when you go over bigger bumps, you bottom out a lot more than other cars. I think that's because they just keep them softly sprung, unlike Audi and BMW. Does mean it's more comfortable though. In terms of parking, this is actually one of the better coupe body shape cars to park with. The rearward visibility really isn't that bad, and you've got a reverse camera with all-round parking sensors. Not standard, but it's definitely something worth having. Although the rearward visibility is better than most other coupes, it's still not quite as good as the normal hatchback. Turning circle is also pretty good for quite a large car. I know, large car and CLA shouldn't really go together, but this car is actually nearly the same size as a C-Class now. You got to think of it more of a mini CLS than something closer to an A-Class, really. Coming out of junctions, the dual clutch gearbox does a really good job of blending gears together. And so far, this engine suits the car pretty well, I have to say. Okay, we're going to reset the trip computer now and see what MPG we can get on the motorway. Before we get on the motorway, let's see what the handling is like. Put the car into sports mode, this will downshift a couple of gears. I do have paddles, so I can change the gears myself, which I might do actually. Steering's a little bit heavier, and of course the throttle response is slightly sharper. Yeah, this engine certainly has low-down torque, but the high-end power is lacking somewhat. Above about 5,000 RPM, it seems to die off quite a lot. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means there's a lot of low down torque, which is where you're going to be most of the time. Actually sounds okay as well. Okay, let's go back into Eco and see what MPG we can squeeze out of this car. Okay, now we're on the motorway, we can talk about some of the other features of this car. So let's start with road noise and wind noise. Well, the road noise is actually not that good. I think that's mainly because we're riding on some pretty loud tyres, but for some reason I'm getting this like loud whistling noise coming into the cabin. And even if we are running on not very good tyres, the chassis should still kind of limit the noise coming through, really. It's not terrible, but it's not quite as good as an Audi A3. Wind noise, however, is very good. That is kept to an absolute minimum. I think that's helped by the fact that this has got a very smooth body shape, so it's actually quite an aerodynamic car. Then in terms of seat comfort, these seats are actually really nice. You can get nice and low in the car, making it feel a little bit more sporty than it actually is. And then you can adjust the pitch of the base. You've got a little extendable bit for your thighs as well. And the bolsters hold you in really nicely. They're perfectly judged. Suspension on the motorway is also really good. It irons out pretty much every bump. It's definitely better than the equivalent BMW 1 Series or Audi A3. Then in terms of interior quality, whilst this is a very flashy cabin, and you do have stitch leather on the door cards and the dash, and then you've got some really nice brushed aluminium trim, it's not quite as well put together as an Audi A3 or a BMW 1 Series. Things down here sort of move around just a little bit more, and there is the odd rattle in here, even though this car is only 2 years old, but again, it's like nitpicking. Then in terms of visibility, this car is actually not that bad. Even though you've got a coupe body shape, these doors are actually quite long if you look at the car from the outside, which means the B-pillar is a lot further behind you than it usually would be in an A-Class, meaning checking your blind spot is really easy. Then of course you've got a curved bit of glass on the wing mirror. That's actually on both sides of this car. Usually they only do it on one side. And it just means you don't have to turn your head all the way around to check your blind spot. Then steering on the motorway, this is where Mercedes really gets it right. Combined with the really comfortable suspension, the steering, I don't know how they do it. It just seems to stay super centered the whole time when you're on the motorway. It doesn't follow any tram lines in the road, and when you're going over bumps in the road, it doesn't jiggle about at all. It just keeps you dead straight. Then in terms of other amenities, you've got dual zone climate control, so if your passenger likes to be warmer or colder than you, they can do that. Then you've got the speaker system, and this is just the bog standard system, and I have to say, it's actually not that bad. The bass can get a little mushy when you turn it all the way up, but the mids and the highs remain clear no matter how high you turn the volume up. So how did we do in terms of MPG? Well, we've managed 43.5 on that 15-mile stint on the motorway, and that's not bad. It's a little bit better than something like a VW Golf R or a Cupra, but I have to say I was expecting it to be just a little bit better. This engine should be getting about 54 to 58 miles per gallon on the motorway, and I do think that's possible. You just have to be very light-footed with the car. So how does this CLA handle a twisty road? Let's find out. So twisty road driving then. I put the car back into sports, went for the sports dials this time as well. And although this is a base engine Mercedes, it should still put a smile on my face. As you saw by the 30 to 70 time, it's actually alright. It's not rip your face off fast, but it's quick enough. You can get up to the national speed limit. Suspension, even though it's soft, it's pretty good at just keeping the car under control. And the paddles do make it a little bit more exciting. But one thing that actually impressed me quite a lot is the chassis balance of this car. Although it's front wheel drive, it has a really neutral feel to it when you come round a corner. You can feel the back moving about a bit, and it does actually allow you to adjust the placement of the car on the road quite well. Again, the steering is really nice in this car. And in sports mode, the engine has this kind of like peppy noise to it. It's actually alright. This car certainly gives you plenty of confidence down a B road. But the chassis is the thing that still stands out. You can really place the car. Yeah, somehow it's still really relaxing. I don't know quite how they've managed that. Another thing Mercedes always does really well is the brake pedal feel. Brakes themselves are good, but the feel of the pedal when you push it is something a lot of manufacturers don't quite get right. Usually they're either too grabby, so you kind of slam to a stop, or they don't fill you with enough confidence to a point where you keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them, and you end up braking a lot later than you initially intended to. So what's the overall verdict on this Mercedes CLA then? Well, I'd say if you want something that has a bit more looks and a bit more sharp edges than your typical Mercedes A-Class, this is definitely something to go for. It's got the same interior, more or less. Practicality is nearly just as good. The only disadvantage is the lack of headroom in the rear, but it's not a massive issue. And the big difference that this car has over the A-Class is actually nothing to do with the body shape. The suspension underneath the car is stiffer, but it's also a very different system. You have completely independent suspension on this car rather than a torsion beam, and it just makes it feel very slightly more luxurious and more refined regardless of what you're doing. And the engine, although it's not built by this manufacturer, it's still got the right character. It's got enough low down torque to keep you moving, and that's what a Mercedes should have. It should feel effortless to drive, yet fun enough that you can have a good bit of excitement on a B road. Well, we're heading back to the dealership now, so I'll wrap up the video here. As always, if you like the video, give it a like, and why not subscribe to our channel? Not only can you see more videos like this, you'll also be able to see all the stock we have for sale, actually including this car. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.